Hey everybody, this is Kenny from TUNZ Records. Going to talk to you about this week's show with Sean McKenna. We've got a whole bunch of great stuff we're going to be talking about this week, especially how to make the most out of digital streaming services. And I've got Shane. He said, that's what she said.
That's right.
And we're going to be discussing everything about digital. Make the most of your digital this week. We're going to be talking about that on the show Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Join us for the Indie Show. Remember, I am Kenny.
And you are not.
That's right, so have a great one, everybody. Well, here we are. It's Canada Day weekend. We're off on a big ride.
We are.
Another adventure with Harry and Kenny.
That's right. He's Kenny and I'm not.
Have a great day, everybody.
And he's Kenny and you're not.
You're not.
There's the outtakes for this week's show. I thought I would share that with you folks. Tonight we're going to talk about, we're going to continue that conversation about AI music and a whole bunch more stuff that, Sean and I want to bring to the forefront. There is some stuff that's been posted on social media this week about music, the music business, and so forth. And so we're going to talk about that tonight as well. I'm going to share out to a couple of other people here tonight, and then we're going to get on with the show. All right, there we go. All right, so we're going to talk about AI music tonight. Is it music? Isn't it music? And we're going to talk about the business of music itself and some of the things that are drivers, some of those things that are distractors or detractors from the music business itself. Sean's had a few posts this week on his Barstools and Bandtalk Rimshots with Sean page, and there's some stuff that I pulled off there for tonight's show as well. But I'm sure we'll be talking about that. And I know that Sean's doing some promo for a Halloween event coming up out on the East Coast. He's probably going to talk about that tonight. Just put a little plug in for that. As well as, I think there was something on a radio station today about, or at least in the last couple of days, about potential a concert coming to the East Coast and people dissing that. And I know Sean had some comments about that as well. So we'll probably talk about that tonight as well. But before we do, I'm going to introduce you my co-host with the most from the East Coast, Sean McKenna from the podcast Barstools and Bandtalk Rimshots with Sean. Hey, buddy.
Hey. I want to start something off here. While you were talking, I'm on Mitch Lafran's page. He's a buddy of mine, rock journalist. And this thing about Arnel Pineda from Journey, having to apologize for. Here's what I'm going to say, and I said it a bunch of times. Like, the guy's got no reason to apologize. He's the original YouTube, star that was found, in my opinion. So all these guys that are posting stuff, he was the guy that started it. If you go and see the video that they're all talking about, my line to somebody was, if I had found a singer like that when I was in high school, he would have been in my band. And I think it's ridiculous that he's got to do this multiple times. Now, I am told by some people that his culture is very much, apologize if you think you've offended somebody or whatever. So maybe that's what he's doing. Lay off the guy, man. He's awesome. End of story.
Yeah, I think what people don't get about people that are singers is that they have a biological instrument. I mean, it's not like a guitar where you can change the strings, or drums where you can change the drum head and make it sound brighter.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's like anything. The older you get, you have to use it differently and more wisely and whatnot. But that guy's still singing at a high level. Like, I don't care who says what, and it's so boring that people will sit on a couch and pick apart a performance when they're sitting on a couch. If you're putting yourself out there and doing it, that's one thing. I guess I'll respect your opinion. But you see these people that are shitting on this guy, and it's like, are you kidding me? The guy's amazing. He's been in Journey longer than Steve Perry was in Journey.
Yeah, Arnold's got his chops. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the thing is that, is some of that comment coming from people who just don't like Journey anymore, period? right?
Well, there's
And,
been
and
drama around that band for well over a year. Well, I'd even argue when Dean Castronovo kind of was, pardon me, surreptitiously shown the door because of some personal troubles, right? I mean, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, there's drama going around that band right now. Um, who cares? Like, if they're still doing it, like, here's your choice: either take part, buy the tickets, go to the shows, or don't.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
it.
you don't have to go to listen to them if you don't like who they are or
Right,
how they sound.
right.
But they're still out there doing it. They're still being able to play, big arenas, and they're not necessarily headlining shows these days because they've been opening for other acts.
No, they're still headlining, man, and that's some of what they've been doing the last week. Like they were at Rock in Rio, I think it was. But the bottom line is that guy, like, God love him for going out there apologizing. Like, I would be, yeah, sorry. Like, come on, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. And I just, it really, it's really unfortunate that where we are in this business, that, things like, perfection and tunes that aren't necessarily human generated are causing a lot of this stink, i.e., the AI and Pro Tools and all this nonsense, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that is causing a lot of this, and people going, well, they should auto tune them. Well, no, no, like
Why?
what you're hearing is what you're hearing. You're hearing his natural voice, right? And so what if he isn't on the top of his game? I mean, viruses, colds, other things that these guys fight to still go on and play live.
You know what everybody's pining for? They're pining for that which does not exist on certain levels, right? So you get the Eddie Trunks of the world. God love Eddie. Please come on my show. I've asked you a bunch of times to debate the tracks and whatnot. But somebody uses tracks, and somebody like Eddie Trunk is all over them for tracks. They don't use tracks and they sound terrible. They're all over them for that. They want perfection, which doesn't exist in a lot of cases, man. And the beauty of music is that human element that they're trying to basically remove. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and I think we're in a different era of music these days. We have a lot of these legacy artists who are winding down their careers. And we've had bands like Aerosmith that have
Yeah.
have stopped touring because of Steven Tyler's voice.
Mhm.
Bon Jovi, who is no longer touring because John does not feel that he can deliver what the fans expect,
Right.
or what he expects of himself, right?
Mhm.
So he's made a conscious decision that he's not going to do that. So we have that happening, and yet we have some newer artists on the horizon. But you've got legacy artists that are on their that have, I don't know if they're on their way out, but you got quotes by Gene Simmons who says, you know, there's not going to be another this band or another that band or these other famous bands. Those days are gone. The
Let,
record
let,
industry's changed.
let me say something about that. Everybody knows I kind of like Kiss. All right. I had a guy the other day that gave me heck because I was crowding up his feed with Kiss stuff. That's well established. Here's what I'm going to tell you about Gene, and I saw that quote and I looked into it today. And if you take Gene's track record of working with other artists besides Kiss, it ain't that great,
No,
right?
not
So
really at all.
he discovered Van Halen, but he wasn't able to get them to his management to take them. So Van Halen went off and did their own thing. He started his own record label, which produced some great bands. But after Gene was kind of gone, so Gene, he's an amazing dude at making money for himself. Um, but I can't put the face paint on and be Gene Simmons, so I don't really know how much accept of what he's saying because that's basic. And we'll see you later and best of luck. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and I don't think the game is over. I think the game has changed.
Absolutely. As soon as you hear the term old school, you're dealing with somebody, or it's somebody that's having a hard time accepting that the game has changed, and that's a rough spot to be. I do get that because there's so much to learn, and there's people that are very good at
Right.
working the landscape. Very good at working the landscape.
Speaking of game changers, I watched the first episode of the Tragically Hip's documentary.
Oh yeah.
All I can say is, wow. I always knew that Downey was a prolific writer, but as you watch more and more of this documentary, you realize what that band was in terms of the music that they created over the lifespan of the band.
So first to say, I never grew up as a huge Hip fan, and I know I got to give back my Canadian card to say if I say that I was a guy who, but I'm not. I don't play favorites because I wasn't a huge Rush fan, and I certainly respect them. I was a huge Triumph fan. I was a pretty big April Wine fan, major Helix fan. I mean, we could do this all night. The Hip for me was just kind of one of those bands that kind of fell into where they did, but they had some great tunes and what have you. I became a huge Gord Downie fan, bigger than ever was, about 3 months ago. And a story that a good friend of mine, Michael Patchlock, who is the stage manager for the Headpins, and he and I were talking, and he was telling me a story about him being on the road with the Hip, and they're doing a show, and Gord was doing this thing. He had his eyes closed, and somebody threw something from the crowd and hit him in the head. And he got all kind of weird and freaked out. He wouldn't talk to anybody at the end of the gig, goes back to the hotel. Michael sees him the next morning at breakfast, and he's like, "Hey, Gord, how's it going?" And Gord's like, "Hey, Michael, how's it going? You all right?" "What do you mean?" "Well, you took a pretty big hit on the head there from that can. Did it hurt?" Michael, Gord, this is what he did. He goes, "Only right here," and he tapped his heart. And basically, what it was it hurt his feelings that somebody was to do that, and when he was trying to put on a show, and I was like, what a statement from a dude. When I probably would have jumped off the stage and tried to pummel the crap out of the guy.
Yeah.
So that's Gord Downie to me.
Yeah, he definitely is. He's, I never realized what a prolific writer was till I started watching the documentary and really seeing the band, and it totally makes sense why they never really took off in the U.S., right? Because their music was so much Canadian content. I mean, every song that the band wrote and played had Canadian history, Canadian isms in it. And it was all stuff that Downey had read. And when he took the wheel in terms of writing the vocals for the band, that was a tough pill to swallow for other band members who were enjoying their writing skills, right?
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, when I look back on it, and then, like I said, I'm only an episode and a half deep into the documentary so far, but as I look at it, I go, maybe not such a bad idea to let him write the vocals. I mean, it's the same as Rush. I mean, who would have known the drummer wrote all the vocals for Geddy Lee?
So he wrote the lyrics. I'm going to wager to guess Geddy Lee probably wrote most of the melody lines. I think Neil did the lyrics and arrangements and stuff like that, but I think Geddy Lee had most of the hand in the melodies.
Yeah, and I mean, like I'm saying, there's that lyrical content, and from Gord's perspective, he wanted to write the lyrics because he was singing the lyrics, and he wanted to be able to sing something that he believed in. But the interesting thing was, they showed this notebook that he carried with him everywhere he went. And somebody would say something, or he would listen to a statement being made in an interview or something, and he would take a line from that interview or whatever, and that became a line in the song.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it's just crazy how you could take a song and interject something like that you would hear maybe one time. I mean, the song Little Bones, for example, when they explain where the concept for the song came from, it's really, really interesting because, a lot of people probably didn't know all of the things that went into the lyrics for the making of that song. Just very interesting.
Well, I mean, those are what spawned these songwriter circle things, right?
Exactly. Here's an interesting comment. You can tell me who you think made this comment. Bands are businesses. No matter what level of musical success you're aiming for, remember bands are businesses. Band members are entrepreneurs. Just like any business, it's your job to promote and market your company as well as to always give your customers, your fans or followers, the very best product or performance possible. So always work hard and do your part because at the end of the day, you are ultimately responsible for your own successes and failures.
That sounds like something Jedi Master Michael Brandvold would say, but I don't know if it was him or not.
He posted. I don't know if that was his saying because it's a meme that got posted. But obviously Michael endorses that 100% if he posted that
Yep.
On his profile. What do you think about all that? How does that relate to your world?
That's my world every day because I have conversations with people that everything from how do I promote myself more to uh, the term I'm old school. And there used to be budgets and radio and all the stuff that no longer exists. People spend more time and energy pining for the thing that isn't here anymore instead of just figuring out how to promote themselves. And um, it's it's uh, it's frustrating, but I mean, I'm to the point with it where, and I always say to people, it's like this isn't. You ask me a question, it's not me reciting the answer based upon me. I go to my people that I know and I say, "What do you think about this?" And then I bring back information. And I think it's just a really weird thing if you ask a question, you get an answer from somebody that's doing what you're asking, and then you question it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that particular thing right there is, you have to promote. You are a business, whether you like it or not. If you're playing music and you complain once about not getting paid, you're a business. Period. That's
Right.
it.
Right. And I mean, and I know there's been a bunch of posts about that the last little while. Everything from, you know, people getting double booked,
Yep.
venues
Yep.
that double book artists. I mean, there's a big problem right there.
Yep.
And I think you had a post there on your wall the other day about that, about venues that double book artists and what problems that can cause.
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, everybody's human, and I'm the first to admit that I'm brutal with a calendar and I'm brutal remembering things, and I have people to help me. And you can forget things, right? So, or you have too many cooks in the kitchen. Person A books something, and person B doesn't realize, and they book something, and and you have an issue. I told a story on, I think it was yesterday, the day before, on one of the posts. 2008. We used to play a lot of the boats that used to go around Halifax Harbor, and they would book you on the weekends. And we showed up, and as we're loading our gear on, another band showed up, and they're like, "It's our gig." Well, no, it's our gig. So we showed each other emails, and it turned out we had been booked 2 months before, and they had only been booked the week before by a different person. Anyway, they demanded the gig,
Uh-oh.
and I looked at the guy and I said, "You're not getting the gig." And I said, "We can do this one of two ways." I said, "We can do it the hard way, which won't be fun for anyone, or you can just stand aside and go on to your next gig." And my band did the gig. But the point is that stuff can happen. So I think the best way to not have it happen to you is just follow up with the venue a week or two beforehand and make sure you're still on the on the calendar, right?
Yeah, I think somebody made the comment on there. Make sure that you start posting, start promoting your event, and tagging the venue in your post if you're doing it on social media, because then the venue realizes that you're the band that's playing that gig.
Or the venue might cut you because I saw that happen a couple weeks ago too, where
Really?
yep. There was a band that was scheduled to play a particular venue, and when it started being tagged, I don't know exactly what happened, but it was like, you know what? It's not going to run this time, and we'll get you next time. And it wound up being not great. Um, the big thing, I guess, that you gotta do for yourself is to follow up and make sure that you're there. And the one thing that I am going to suggest strongly, and this is just purely from professionals that I know, bad things go sideways. Don't use social media to call people out because guess what? It might work for a couple weeks, but it stays there forever, and it might not work in your favor.
Yeah, social media is never the place to call somebody out. That should always be done in private. Should always be behind closed doors between you and whoever you have the disagreement with. I don't like the whole keyboard warrior approach to things, because you're right, it can come back to bite people pretty badly sometimes, and not such a good thing.
Well, I have a very simple rule. Like if I'm going to comment to somebody, anything that I comment isn't something that I wouldn't say to their face, and so I try not to be mean, um, and I try not to embarrass anybody in the comments. But if somebody can say yeah, however, if they were sitting across the table from me having a beer, and what happens is, unfortunately, you get people that don't take that mindset. They just go for guns, and they would never say it to your face, but they don't have a problem saying it when they're typing it. And a friend of mine who is a major social media guru, she basically said, when you're putting something in comments, do it knowing that you won't get punched in the face. And I was just like, that's good advice, and that's what I try to do.
So does this beg the question that if people are booking gigs, it is more than a verbal contract in order here?
So I had an offline conversation with somebody who is a very good friend of mine, and what I'm going to tell you is basically, if you're talking anything, you know, the amount of money that you're talking, even if you're getting 5 grand for a gig, it's still small claims court. It's still an awful big hassle, and oftentimes you think you're going to win, and sometimes so. I don't really know the value of a contract because people are in such a state right now where they're always challenge me, challenge me. I think COVID put an awful lot of people in a spot where I don't really care what you're going to say because it'll get thrown out. And I don't know what the answer is. I personally think if a venue does something that isn't good, um, and they don't turn things around, you stop dealing with them. And if you continue to deal with them, then you do it at your own kind of risk, right?
Yeah, I think you had good advice there earlier about the follow-up piece. Do a follow-up maybe a week or two after you've got the booking, just to confirm the booking. Uh, just say, hey, I'm updating my calendar. Just want to make sure that we're still on for this date, and want to confirm it with you.
So I worked in corporate sales for a long time, and people that know me know that. People that don't know me might not know that, but I was on a sales course one time, and the instructor was talking about the cycle of the sale, and it was basically everybody gets sick to death to make a cold call because they're afraid they're going to be told no, but they make the call and they build a report and they go on a sales call, and then they try to pitch a product, and then they leave, and then they never follow up. And the psychology is they went through those first three things and conquered them. They don't want to follow up because they're afraid that they're going to say no and wind right back up where they were. And so many people don't follow up because they're terrified of what the answer is going to be. And I get that. But it can only be no or yes. Those are your two options, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I remember in the early 90s, myself and two other guys from London put together a cover band, a three-piece cover band, and we played all around the London area. And of course, that was before, this stuff in the internet and social media and all that stuff. And so everything was, booked in person or by telephone.
Yep.
Right. And I remember when I did cold calls for bookings, I purposely would go over to the bar and talk to whoever was, or the club, whoever's doing the bookings,
Yep.
and meet them personally. And I remember this one place, we'd never played at it before, and it was a sort of a, if you got to play at this particular club in London, it was always packed, right? It was always packed. You always had a really great crowd there. And I remember going in, and he said, I don't care if you bring anybody into your shows, but you better keep everybody here.
That's fair ball.
Right. And so the interesting thing was, he said, so we're going to try this. And so I'll give you your first gig here on this particular night. And so we'll do a Friday night. Friday night's not our busiest night, but we're going to give you a Friday night to start, see how it goes. Right. Not only did we hold the crowd there, but people from upstairs in the bar upstairs came down because we were playing all the stuff that everybody wanted to hear.
Yep.
Right. we were playing, FM 96, of course, the local London station. We were playing the top 40 off FM 96. And our guitar player said, we're going to learn every song that FM 96 is playing, and that's what we're going to play every time we play this club.
Yeah, and I mean, I can recall playing bars where you'd have a good crowd if you did, like, say, the whole week, and somebody would come and see you Monday, Tuesday, and more people would start coming because we heard the band was amazing and we wanted to come out. And so the crowd would kind of build throughout the week, and then by the weekend you'd have there's so less of a chance of that happening now, especially where I am here, because you either have what I call the destination bars where people are going just because, or you have the ticketed event bars where you got to do some work, but there's no build up like there used to be, right? It's like, get in there, do your promotion, hope that you slay the show, hope that you keep them, repeat.
Yeah, and this was I can remember, like, before internet. So I would go to the local print shop and make up posters and take them over to the venue a couple of weeks before we'd play there, and have them posted in the venue. Our drummer and I got these stickers made up with the band logo on them and the band name, and we stuck them all over the bar.
Yep.
Right. And it was kind of cool because it was like our calling card. And so when people knew we were going to be playing there, they would just show up because they knew that we were going to play all the stuff that they wanted to hear.
Well, and it's funny. I remember, this is going back 2.5 years. There was a venue that had a new band, and the owner said, will you come out and check them out? And so I went out and I checked them out, and the bar was packed and people were having a good time. I couldn't really tell if they were drinking, but the bar owner, he was happy because, so he said, what do you think? I said, what I think is, remember the episode of Three's Company, The Impossible Dream? And he looks at me weird. The Impossible Dream is the episode where Larry Dallas wants to sing at Jack's Bistro, so he packs the audience by paying his friends to show up. And then every other gig has nobody because Larry thinks that he's made it and word of mouth is there. And so Jack has to fire Larry because he's terrible. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. They had packed the audience with their friends, and the friends didn't show up to the next gig. And he goes, okay, I know what the Impossible Dream is. And it's just, they were a band that was doing good for their home crowd, but they weren't a band that should have been playing in that room, and in my opinion. And
I think when we played, I think we knew a half a dozen people there, maybe. It was mostly, and I mean, because London's a university town, right? We had a big university crowd there all the time. So, it was you played to a captive audience, but you didn't keep them if you didn't play music they wanted to hear. I mean,
well, this is the thing.
Line.
And I think anybody that wants to play in a band should a few times go and play a venue they've never played before, just to see what happens. Because when you see familiar faces, it's one thing. When you're going in somewhere and the bar staff is kind of weird because they don't know what to make of you. And I mean, everybody knows Rule 101 is make sure you get along with the staff.
That's right.
You go in there and have that feeling of you want to throw up before you play because you don't know what's going to happen. You should do that because it's like, I find a lot of, especially around here, people go on with a stacked audience and they're playing the same tunes that a lot of people are. And they're, it has nothing to do with what's going on stage. It's, you got to keep them, but it's not even hard to keep them sometimes. And I think everybody that wants to do this thing for a living should try that.
Right. So I want to switch gears a little bit now. I want to talk a little bit about, you and I were talking the last time we were together about AI music and whether, is it really music? And some people were saying that, even, maybe producers should have to put disclaimers on their music to say that it's actually produced with AI.
Well, I mean, the best argument that I heard from somebody about that is Yoko Ono didn't have to do that. And some people didn't necessarily consider her a musician, and some people did, right? I think it's never been easier to get in the music business than right now. And I think it's going to get even easier yet because you don't really have to have talent. There's tools that can help you do everything, right? So is it music? Sounds like music. I guess it kind of makes music. To me, music involves human beings. It involves mistakes. It involves a process of learning. It involves paying dues. It involves all that stuff. And I mean, if and Brent might not like me saying this because I know he loves AI, right? But if he took that side of it out and remember what it was like to learn how to play and get good and get proficient, like people don't do that now.
Right. I know like people like Brent that produce videos using AI.
Yep.
And I think that there are useful aspects of AI possibly to help tell the story of the song.
Yep.
Right, from a visual perspective. But the actual creation part of the music, there's that whole part of people like yourself who've worked hard to hone your skills over the years, and then somebody can come along and make those parts up with AI who haven't paid their dues, haven't played hard, have not worked hard at building a skill set. All they've got to do is just be really good behind a computer.
Yep.
Is that fair?
Well, I mean, has the music business ever been fair? I mean, think about it, right? Right. So, I mean, like, if you're approaching it from that perspective, I don't think A, you're going to be able to make a good argument, and B, you're never going to solve it. So, is it fair? Well, again, and I don't want to get too deep, but it's like when you talk to people about music. A friend of mine says I'm stupid for liking Kiss. Well, I say he's stupid for liking what he likes. Are we wrong? Neither of us is wrong. We like what we like, and it doesn't make us any smarter. Another example, they do these polls, 100 best drummers, based on, is there some god that sits up there that says, well, here's
what is the criteria for what's good and what's bad, right?
And I looked at the 100 best drummers, and on my list, like 40, I counted 43 of them wouldn't have been on it. But does that make me the smart guy? Well, no. And then you go and you look at 5 other drummers who are rating it, and they all had different guys. The top 5 were, fairly similar. So I guess my point is it doesn't matter what you think. Well, it does matter what you think, but it's like whether you like it or not, it's here, so you're just gonna have to work with it.
Well, what if, for example, someone using AI music, there had to be a disclaimer on it, the same as there's a disclaimer if there's what do you call it, adult content.
Well, that's what do they call them? The Washington Wives there that Dee Snider and Frank Zappa took on back in the day. I mean, so there's a great example of why some of this stuff gets under my skin. Because, a group of people that think they should make decisions for everybody else based upon the fact that they think they're smarter, put the gavel down and say, hey, Ken, you and all your relatives from here on in, you have to see this sticker on there because they said the F word.
Right.
So it's who gets to be the keeper of morality and whatnot. So that to me is a little bit of a pain. That being said, it's not hard. You're using AI, boom, check the box. I'm using AI, and let the people decide if they're going to support it or not. Because I think what happens with this argument is that AI is used, people support it, but it's like, oh, you're stupid because you don't know it's AI. Fair enough. If they don't know it's AI, let them know it's AI. If they still support it, then there's your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be discerning listeners who are going to go, you know what, that's lacking that human factor. The vocal sounds a little too perfect for my liking, and maybe that doesn't have that human element to it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still up to people to decide. All I'm saying is that when I publish music, I have to fill in a disclaimer that says there is explicit content in the vocals. So if someone uses a curse word in a vocal, I have to, when I publish the music, that disclaimer has to go in there that there is explicit content in the vocal, even if somebody says, shit or something like that.
I get that. But that even still, like in this day and age, was explicit content. Like I couldn't even answer that question. Because I see some stuff on TV that you never would have seen 20 years ago. Yet Archie Bunker, All in the Family, they could say now that if you did something like it's just such a weird. time.
It is a weird time because I mean I've more recently seen, because for a long time they took smoking out of movies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now you see people smoking in Netflix movies and Netflix shows.
Well, yeah, they're going to bring that back, and I mean, it's just like, smoking is a funny one, because I remember in Halifax when they were doing the smoking bylaw, and a big guy that was in favor of getting rid of smoking was a city councilman. I won't name him, but he came out to the bar one night, and I said, "Look, can I ask you a question?" "Yep, sure." I said, "Why is it? Because you guys have nothing to do with health. You don't fund health. What is your beef?" "Well, you know what? When I go downtown, I want to go downtown and not go home smelling like cigarette smoke when I go to a bar." I said, "Great. How often do you go to a bar?" "Well, once a month." And I'm like, "On behalf of your once a month contribution, all these people that you're trying to put out of business, thank you." And he didn't get what I was saying, but that's the problem that happens when these people get into positions of where they can sway things. All of a sudden, they just start hammering stuff down, and you don't know their people want versus what they're trying to put through, and it gets so silly.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things. There's a couple of comments here. Brent says he doesn't agree with AI music. I'm just going to put that up there.
Yeah.
And then Boiler Beach is on here and says, I feel a little dirty using AI for any creative product. An AI video is taken from a creative artist that could produce that for us. Fair comment.
Yep.
But AI is out there. It's a tool. It's designed to be used for a whole lot of different things. I think it can be used to enhance the storytelling. There's going to be people out there that are going to make music with AI, irrespective of whatever we think or say about it. From a musician's perspective, I don't consider it to be legitimate, organically produced music, because it's not coming from a carbon-based individual.
That's fair. And Elizabeth Miller's got a lot of great points there, and she brings up something that is similar but different. Um, I'm not going to mention the name of the artist because I'm told he's been lawyering up a little bit, so I won't go there. However, if you go research YouTube, there's a particular vocal coach who has been accused of being pretty much fake. So a lot of stuff that he's putting up and teaching other people is basically, he's not doing it live. He's using different sorts of things. That's the stuff to me that is incredulous. There's not a tinge of anything to it that I think is useful, and it shouldn't be done, and people should stop supporting it. However, people still do, right?
Yeah, and there is a component of that again, there's not a lot of boundaries anymore about these things. But back in the day, we would say that would border on fraudulent behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely. And isn't it interesting now that Milli Vanilli basically had their lives wrecked and ruined over what is considered absolute, acceptable behavior these days, right?
Yeah, it's acceptable now. Elizabeth Miller made a good comment about Randy Travis, who's unable to sing but has put out an AI product, but
Yeah.
he's completely upfront about it. So he's put a disclaimer in there saying, "Listen, we've used AI to recreate my voice to be able to put this music out there, and for people that are still his fans that want to continue to hear his voice on music, then can you fault them for wanting that?"
Well, and I'll tell you what, Slash had a funny comment a few weeks ago, and a similar thing happened to me, in that he's like, I don't even know if producers today can actually record a guitar amp with the air popping out of it. And I did a track for somebody, and I swear to God, I got an email that was just like, "What's going on? What did you send me?" Because we sent the drum stems, and he's like, "The snare's bleeding into the kick drum mic and the tom," and it's like, that's how you record stuff. But he was used to using drum apps, right, where none of that stuff is there, and you just pop it in, and so you got to EQ, you got to do this, you got to do that. I said, do me a favor, just take my drum part out and put some of your drum app in, and then compare it to my. And he's like, "What you did is amazing." Yes, because it's real drums, and that's where it's going. You're going to get people that are not even going to be able to mix real instruments very soon.
Yeah, this no doubt is from our friend Jeff. I'm currently working on AI video, but our music will never be. And that's true. I mean, these are guys who work really hard at their craft, who are skilled musicians, who really want to put their music out there, and it does demonstrate um, something that's much different when people are actually playing those instruments as opposed to somebody who actually just creates those instruments using AI,
Yep.
where there's no one that has any skill level that's put into that.
Yep.
Rather,
No, that's
just
fair.
I just find it as a really interesting topic, and I find it that like I said, I personally believe that AI can be used to help tell the story. I think that there's a reason that it exists. Um, I think that the one comment that was made about it when we were talking about this a few weeks back is that AI, we thought that AI was created to take away mundane jobs from us as humans so that we could be free to create.
Yeah, but that's never the case, right? Because if you take auto mechanics, I have a friend of a friend who had a mechanic who basically dropped out of school back in the 60s and became a mechanic. And as soon as they went from carburetor to fuel injection, he didn't know how to read. So he didn't know how to figure out and study to work on. So he stopped being a mechanic. And that's, how creative is that? It's not very creative, right? And all this stuff is it's always designed to get rid of. You hear car plants that are trying to get labor down by replacing them with robots, and um, but as soon as you remove everybody, then who's left? The CEO. Yeah, they're making money, but
Here's an interesting thing, because a lot of people even in cars have gone to resto mods that now have fuel injection in their motors. My brother-in-law's got an old school 66 Nova, and he's having a hard time finding a mechanic that understands carburation.
yep, that's
That
what.
it's like a skill set that's going to be lost forever.
Well, one of the funniest things you will ever see is hand somebody that is, my youngest son's age, about 17, a phone with the rotary dial on it.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
Honest to God, it's hilarious. You know, and I remember getting a VCR and the remote was actually attached by a cable. You know what I mean? Like, um, and now I can. There's an app on my phone that I can turn a TV on from 3,000 kilometers away. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy how things have changed dramatically in terms of the landscape, and how you know AI has changed the landscape for music in terms of how it gets published, how it gets out there. Uh, you know, I, I am a believer that if something is 100% produced with AI, then there should be some sort of a disclaimer to say that this music is produced with AI. There are no real musicians that have actually played on this track.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair statement. I guess the only challenge you're going to have, and this is an argument that I would love feedback on, but the reason why things don't change, especially in the music business, is because some people do get pissed off, but not enough people get pissed off to do something about it. So they basically think, oh well, you know what, I can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to go with the grain, and then it doesn't change. It's just it's a blip, and I think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see some stuff happening. I mean, Elizabeth made the comment earlier that the first Queen album is being redone, and they're pitch correcting uh, Freddie's voice.
Stupid, totally stupid. She says another good point here. It comes down to this: do you want real music with no safety net when you attend a live performance, or do you prefer fake music? Well, I prefer the not fake music, but Elizabeth, unfortunately, and this is my daily internal rage, most of the world doesn't care. And that hurts me immensely because when I see somebody that works really hard to put something out and then a song that sounds like it was done by a 6-year-old in a computer goes number one. Well, it goes number one because people take it in, and that's just the weird, unfair part of this business, right? That's just what happens.
Yeah, I mean, and it's it even goes to we even see those levels, those unfair levels, or those crazy levels, or whatever people are into these days. You and I talked about this before. Somebody spends hours and hours to make a really, really great music video, right? They put it up on YouTube, but the guy feeding raccoons hot dogs
I just had this conversation again today.
outstrips him with views. It always boggles the mind what people are going to think, right? Or what people are going to do.
Yes and no, because you can go on TikTok and see basically the stupidest video that comes up will have the most amount of views. And what it is I think people are so, um, and I can't believe that I'm saying this because I go through this all the time. I just think people are so fed up with what they're being fed and what they're being expected to do by, they go to the grocery store and it's too much money and their boss is on them about this, that, and the other thing. And the person that should be getting fired gets promoted. People are just tired of it. They just want stupid, mind-numbingly stupid stuff, and that's why
Right.
it resonates. I want to. Deanbo said this: "I'm late arriving." He wants to know would older bands such as his favorite band, Def Leppard, get into AI. And I'm going to say this, Deanbo, you probably know this. I'm going to break your heart, but Def Leppard stopped using real drums after the second album. So everything Pyromania and beyond is drum machine. They may have started letting Rick Allen play on some stuff. Mania Hysteria were drum machine. So they're not adverse technology. I think where they draw the line is they still do an awful lot of their own stuff live. They might enhance, but they don't totally forklift and go digital or fake.
Yeah, my wife and daughter have been to see a few Def Leppard shows, and they say that they're one of the best live bands they've seen because there's no flash in the pan to distract you. You're watching a band who's actually playing their music.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and when I said that about Rick Allen, is that he can't? No, he can. It's just when they were working with Mutt Lange, if you go back and read the stories of Mutt Lange, that guy was so particular about how he wanted things recorded, and
everything had to be perfect.
Well, there's a legendary story about when they were going in to do Back in Black, and Phil Rudd almost threatened him with his life because he wanted Phil won that argument. But that's not to say Rick Allen couldn't do it, because I mean that guy just what he was able to accomplish after his accident was incredible. But it's on the one hand, technology is not a bad thing, right? Because if you use it to not replace but enhance certain things, it's not a bad thing. But man, if you're going out there looking everything.
Look at that comment. McDonald's hasn't sold billions of burgers because they're good.
Well, great point. However, back to my argument. I like McDonald's, so therefore I wouldn't agree with you, right? So it's like who's right and who's wrong. Define perfect. Again, Elizabeth, you know what? I couldn't, because
no, I can't define perfect either.
Perfect to you might not be perfect to me. I don't know who your influences are and your favorite musicians are. That might help me a little bit. But what I grew up on and what I like and what I love and what defined me and made me a player, I can guarantee you a lot of people wouldn't think. They think I was out to lunch, and that's fine. Again, it's the whole beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, and the great thing about music, there's something for everybody, right?
Well, there you go. Yeah, like McDonald's.
That's right. Here's an interesting thing I'm going to say right now, too, is that Indie Tunes Records, we will not publish AI music. So if you got AI music and you approach me, don't bother, because we're not going to do that. Every artist that's on our label is 100% organic. They produce their stuff themselves. Some of them do. Some of them do use drum samples on their music because they don't have a drummer. And
hit me up, because that's what I do.
Some of them don't, but those drum samples are taken from real drummers.
Yeah, you know what though? So I want to hit Elizabeth's thing here in a second, but to that, I posted something the other day. Everybody here, the comments are to the right. Feel free to light me up. I am not a Steely Dan fan. I am not a Steely Dan fan. I'm going to say that. The very first drum machine was created by Steely Dan's manager, and it was done with performances by Jeff Porcaro.
Right.
And you can find that story. I posted it. So if you want to blame Drum Machine, anybody blame Steely Dan. That's a true story. But anyway, Elizabeth says my favorite era is the 70s. Favorite band is Prism. And you know what? And then she says, well, Indie Tunes published pitch-corrected vocals. Well, of course, everybody does. Here's the thing about the 70s, and Elizabeth would know this, but the way that Brent would be a great example of this. Like, the one thing that Pro Tools allows people to do now is cleanly punch stuff in. So, like in the 70s, if you were to hear original backing tracks and stuff, like scratch tracks and all that stuff, maybe not things that were used. Some of them were not great, and the way that you would have to correct it because they hadn't perfected punching in would be redoing the whole song or slowing or speeding the tape up. What's this? If anybody pitch corrects Ron Tabak, who's Ron Tabak?
I don't know.
Their old buddy. Okay,
I don't know who that is.
Enlighten us, but. There was pitch correction going on in the 70s because they used to do it. And I know this for a fact because I spoke to a number of producers that used to produce stuff back in the 70s. And they would try to fix something if they couldn't do it by speeding or slowing a tape up. And it was a very arduous process. And sometimes it would screw a track up and you have to do it again.
There was a process called tape scraping and also tape cutting and splicing. That edits were done. So it was even done with tape back in the day. It's much easier to do now that it's digital. But I would say that no music ever produced has been 100% organic. There's always been some level of change to it. There's been punch-ins, punch-outs on those tracks. Or someone's gone back in and dubbed over those tracks. Here's a perfect example. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Mm-hmm. John Fogerty went back in the studio and played everybody's parts.
Well, some allege the White Album, Ringo didn't play the drums on that album, right?
Who knows? Not every band out there did their own drummer actually play on their tracks.
Elizabeth, I'm not going to start a fight with you. I don't know you, but voices were changed back in the day.
Yeah, they've always been changed in the day.
And I'm not saying there was pitch corrected, but they were. And I can give you a good example of, and when I'll only go back to about 1982, but I interviewed Max Norman, who produced the first two Ozzy Osbourne albums. And he said that there was because of what was going on with that band and Ozzy and type thing, there was pitchy performances, and he had to fix it by speeding up and slowing down the tape. And otherwise, they wouldn't have got decent vocal performances on certain things. And that was like 81. So it did happen. Frampton Comes Alive, and I interviewed, go check it out on Barstools. I interviewed a guy by the name of Rick Browd who did Double Gonzo Live by Ted Nugent. And he said that was the drums and the guitars were really the only live thing. Everything else was done in a studio, up to and including the crowd noise.
And it was the same as the first Kiss Alive album. That was an overdubbed album.
Absolutely. And I think what's going on, we're not saying there was pitch changed. What we were saying is to correct things, tape would be sped up or slowed down. Punch-ins really only became a thing like mid-70s, late 70s. Even with drums, I mean, people never really tried to punch drums in until 88, 89, because it's very hard, and you can tell if there's a really bad punch-in. So
a lot of times it was just overdubs.
Yeah. I get it's one of my favorite albums. It pained me to find out that a lot of it was, the way it was recorded. I just thought they showed up at the studio at noon, banged the song out, or banged the album out, was done by 5 and ready to go. And I come to find out that it was a lot of overdubs and retakes and so.
Yeah, I mean it's interest. It's an interesting topic, nevertheless. I mean it's one that probably is never gonna die down. But there are bands, performers who perform live who use autotune.
Oh, that's and you know what? Where Elizabeth, where she's talking about that to me is I don't even. I mean, the rap world, like in hip hop, that I guess that genre calls for it, and I mean that's sort of commonplace in what they do, and so I'm not going to say too much about that. But I mean, you'll go and see a singer, and it's just like you can just tell, um, it's either on tape or it's auto tune, and it's tough to watch.
Yeah, I mean, here's an interesting thing that pitch correction actually was introduced in 1975.
Ah,
Believe it or
there you
not,
go.
it was an actual plugin that was developed in 1975. In fact, there's some of the songs. I mean, if you do your research, you'll find some of the songs that actually use pitch correction back in the day. A lot of the things that were done could be done by using other vocal tricks were spring reverb, maybe some slap back echo, and other things. Multi-tracking vocals was another one of those effects.
One of the most incredible stories you're ever going to hear is the making of the first Boston album. And I won't bore everybody with the story, but go and research the first album because Tom Schultz basically built that album in the basement of his house. And he had a
Right.
couple of people that their sole jobs were to keep the record company away from him and make the record company think that work was actually getting done. And, and you have what I think is probably one of the most brilliant rock albums that ever, you know, was created. And there was a lot of vocal overdubs, and there was a lot of different sorts of things that were done that, had they not used those tools, that album I don't think would have been anywhere near what it is. Meatloaf's "Bad to Hell," same thing.
Yeah, and so here's an interesting history lesson here. Variable tape speed. By the 1940s, studio engineers could produce primitive pitch correction by tweaking reel-to-reel magnetic tape recorders' vary speed.
Yeah.
So it started early. It wasn't they changed the speed of the tape, as you said, Sean. The speed of the tape was done. They'd speed up the tape, or splicing the tape was another way that they could alter pitch.
Well, here's another different argument that I will give you that that drummers often have, right? So some guys like their toms wide open and their snares ringing, and other guys like them dead, and some guys like them tuned high and like them tuned low. Well, that's really a version of pitch correcting, and that's a version of effects, right? And
Right.
you know, the jazz guy, and I've had this conversation. You don't put any muffling, you don't put anything in the kick drum. It's wide open, okay? But in a rock setting, that sounds like garbage. Who's right? Who's wrong? So it comes down to personal preference, and if personal preference is you don't like that taking place, that's awesome. I 100% agree with you because it's your choice. Just don't support it, and that's kind of where everything gets blurred, right?
Yeah, so here's a history lesson as well. Digital vocal tuning arrives. Eventide. You've heard of the company Eventide.
Yep.
A well-known manufacturer of digital music effects, originally made its mark with the Harmonizer H910, the world's first digital effects unit introduced in 1975. The H910 was an early type of pitch correction device.
Yeah. I mean, they're even back in the days of Mozart. I'm sure they did things to manipulate sound that there had to be the composer that was the Eddie Van Halen of the day that somebody went, wow, you can do that, and then all of a sudden everybody kind of copied it, because that's things evolve and things change and improve and do. And I'm not saying, again, don't throw tomatoes that I'm saying pitch correction is improving, but I'm saying things change and you know and it happens. And
Yeah,
so as
there were all kinds of tricks done back in the day. Sometimes they actually got an artist to sing at a lower pitch, and then they would speed up the tape to put the tape in pitch.
well, there's that. I mean, um, tuning down. There's a huge contentious thing right now, and any singer will tell you they don't mind it because it helps their voice. I've just interviewed 4 singers in a row that are like, we started doing it 10 years ago, and it's bought me more time, and all these things that you shouldn't do because it's
We
it just
record it. We record all of our stuff, and we perform live in D sharp. We don't tune in standard tuning. We don't tune to concert pitch. It's hard on your voice all night, and when you're working in different environments, it really does change things.
And you know what? The person that is a non-musical person who goes out and buys the CDs and downloads the streams, and they don't probably know, and they don't care. It's the virtuoso guitar player. Like, I had a guy last week who he was I don't remember what it was. It was something that he saw a friend of mine do, and that's terrible technique. And, well, why? Well, because you're not supposed to do that. Well, says who? Well, says everybody I learned from. Everybody you learned from. And you got to start wrapping your head around this stuff, man. There's no, in my opinion, and again, any St. of X grad or Berkeley grad can challenge me on this. There's no book that's got 12 things that if you don't do it, you're wrong. It's just that's nonsensical to me.
No, and that's why there are so many different producers that have so many different angles or ideas about how to produce music. And like you said, Mutt Lange was one of those guys that had really particular ideas about how to produce songs, and even to the point where he wanted everything done to a click track. And some people would say, you know what, recording to a click track is already a form of correction.
Yeah, and I would argue it's a good form of correction, because once you can do it, it makes you very versatile. And it's interesting though with Mutt Lange, right? Because his story is great too. And I mean, we're at a time, but he wanted to record country, and they basically told him, you're a rock guy. And in the back of his mind, he was like, I'm gonna, knock this country music industry on his arse, and he did. But then what ended up happening? He spawned basically a whole imitation of what you see now, right? It's like people are taking rock music and putting country kind of isms to it and calling it country, and that's hence the term new country. But that's what happens, unfortunately. The creators are copied, and then the plagiarists run with it and make the real money, I guess, is what happens.
And I guess I would contend to say too that AI has come as a result of all of those engineering marvels that existed back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you could, or you could also say it's come as a result of people being lazy. And I say that because somebody kept copying and kept copying and kept copying. You're getting the same cookie cutter thing, and some genius said, "Well, why are we paying a human to do the same cookie cutter thing? Why don't we just do this, and then everybody can do it, and I can get rich, and they'll all follow along." And that's essentially what happens. And and this is a guy, I graduated grade 12, and I can figure that out. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right. Again, like I said, the cool thing about music, there's something for everybody, and there's people that are going to dig AI music, and there's going to be people that are going to be discerning and go, you know what, that doesn't feel like or sound like real music to me, and it's not my cup of tea.
No, and bang on. And there's nobody whose musical palette is lighter or narrower than yours truly. I like what I like. I don't like what I don't like. And it's taken me a long time to get to the place that I'm still not 100% there. People on my circle will back this up, that there's no right or there's no wrong. It's what makes sense to the individual that's listening to it.
Right.
I got to learn that even more, because, there's some good stuff that I've probably overlooked over the years because of my stubbornness. But, one man's turd is another man's diamond, I guess.
Very quickly, I just want to say, next week's show, we've got Jason Dozer, the mic stand guy, who's going to be on the show next week. He'll be on the show talking to us about some of his latest clients, including Avril Lavigne, who is sporting some of his gear that he's produced for her. And we'll be talking a little bit about that next week. Jason Dozer, the mic stand guy, also has 2 very successful acts. 84, a tribute to Van Halen, as well as Excitable, a tribute to Def Leppard. So we'll be talking to Jason next week. Until then, this has been Sean McKenna from the East Coast. You're my co-host with the most. I'm Kenny. You're not. This has been the Indie Show. Have a